Okay, MJ, you became a multimillionaire by 33 years old, and you did that by using what you define as the fast lane versus the slow lane. How did you do that?
Sure. The fast lane is leveraging a business venture, but not just any business venture, a business venture that gets away from time. Um, there's a certain mathematics involved. I call it fast lane entrepreneurship. And it involves any kind of business that can separate from your time and that can be scaled, into thousands, if not millions. We're traditionally trained to get wealthy by using mathematics that simply don't work. And they don't work because they can't be scaled. For instance, you only can work 24 hours in a day. So that number, 24, is fixed. You can't do anything about that. And in the case of the slow lane is a narrative that is just everywhere that basically says, hey, you want to save 10% of your paycheck and put that in the stock market. Then after 50 years, you're going to retire a millionaire. So again, there's those mathematics involved there that really do not lend themselves to wealth because you can't scale your lifespan. We all have maybe 78, 80 years of life. You can't scale that number. So fast lane mathematics, as opposed when we're using it in entrepreneurship, means you have a product or a service that can scale and reach thousands and thousands of people. As opposed to trading your time. For instance, if you design websites, you're limited to how many websites you can develop in one day or in 1 week. So I'm very mathematical because mathematics, you can't debate mathematics. 1 + 1 is always going to be 2. So it's a philosophy based on a lot of mathematics as opposed to the slow lane, which is based upon hope and time within the stock market.
So let's talk the example you just gave, which was website building, because, for those that don't know, that was kind of originally way back in the day where the internet began. That was kind of how you got your first rendition as an entrepreneur. I've read Fastlane Millionaire probably 5 or 6 times. It's actually it changed my life. It was actually one of the best books I ever read. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But sure. So an example would be, right, we're taught to work. So then when we get an entrepreneurial idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, we get an entrepreneurial idea, and let's say we're passionate about websites, and we'll use that for example. So then we start trading $1,500 a pop for a website, even if you're really great, $5,000 a pop for a website. And then you're stuck in this pattern where, let's say it takes you 40 hours or 100 hours to build a website. So there's a mathematical limitation on your income. You are not able to have your income just 10x overnight. Well, you can for a little while when you keep raising your prices, but then you hit a ceiling. And so, for example, something that you might be able to do if you were in websites would be either you move to more of the sales position and you bring other people on, and then you can 10x the amount of websites you're doing. Or in your instance, you create a website that you own as the business, which is what you did, that moved you away from directly saying to some entrepreneur, hey, I'll build your website for you. It's $1,000. You did that to fund everything.
Yes.
But I always try to think I'm in 2 businesses. One might be my business where maybe at the beginning, and this is how I thought when I first read your book, I'm in a business where I'm trading time for money. And for me, I was a youth speaker. I did probably 100 high school talks a year. And it was hard work. And so I was in a business that I was taking that money to fund my scalable business. Yeah. And so what you did is you funded your vision to have a scalable business with when you were when small businesses would hire you for whatever, a pop for a website, and then you were able in your spare time to build a business that had a scalable return where once you invested the time, it could have a hockey stick style growth. Am I following that correctly?
Absolutely correct. And in actuality, a lot of people are still doing that. I got started, in web design. So I was, charging $1,500, $2,000, per job. And at the same moment, I was also developing a web service. And then that's when I realized there's an unlimited growth metric in this other business. So eventually that faded away. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs actually on my forum who are using that exact same model. They're developing websites. They're doing cold calling to small businesses, and it's kind of like a level one of the fast lane where instead of trading your time for $25 an hour with a company, you're trading it for a service that can be monetized at $2,500 a pop or $3,000 a pop or whatever. And then they have actually bigger visions to go forward. But when you have no money and you're just trying to pay the rent, that's a perfect way to start. You got to get your feet wet. You got to learn how to make $100 before you can learn how to make $1 million. So that's a great way to get started. That's a great way to begin a hustle. And that's even actually popular nowadays. But eventually you want to be able to get into a system, I call it a wealth equation, where you're operating where you say you can have this hockey stick type of growth, or you can 10x something, or have that kind of result. Starting a business is hard, and no matter what the outcome is, you want to make that outcome life-changing. So you don't want your best case scenario to be, oh my God, I had a great week. Let's go out to Olive Garden. Yeah. You'd rather have, oh my God, I won't have to work for the next 10 years, or, this has changed my life. This has changed my family's life. Maybe, the ability to leave generational wealth or something. So starting a business that doesn't scale and starting a business that does scale, they're both going to be equally hard. So if you're going to make this deep dive, you want the treasure at the bottom of the ocean to be something that's going to have an impact on your life and your family. So let's
use your two models. Your first was trading $1,500 a pop for a website, and you're sitting there and you're coding it all day, and good start, right? And you can get some tax benefits and you work on your own time. But then let's use an example from your own life of the business that actually made you a multimillionaire, and then ultimately, I don't know at what age, I forget, you said in the book that you specifically retired at, but let's use your exact example of what it was. Obviously I know because I've read the books, but explain so somebody can see an actual specific example, because it's almost like learning Spanish, because it's such a foreign language to be like, wait, so I need it makes you have to take a step back from your own mind to be able to see at it objectively. So I'd love you to explain what you did.
I used to drive a limousine when I was in my early 20s, and one of the customers actually said, "Hey, I need a limousine in New York. Do you know any companies?" And I was like, "No." Now, mind you, this was in the late 90s, before the internet. I mean, the internet was going on, but it wasn't very mainstream. And I knew I wanted to get involved in the internet because of the scale potential. And so that's what got me on the idea to start an aggregator of ground transportation. So if you needed ground transportation in a foreign city, you can look up my website, which was at the time limos.com. Actually, it started as limousines.online.com, but then I actually bought the domain in the secondary market because it was such a primary.
Wow, you got limos.com, huh?
Yeah, that's another story in itself, how I got that. But basically I was a networker, an aggregator, and I linked up consumers to their advertisers. So the advertisers would pay me and I would send them customers. And
by customers, the advertisers would be like, for instance, a limo company, and they would pay you to get good placement on your site. And then the customers would be someone, for instance, going to New York that was trying to get a limousine.
On a very thin level, it was lead generation. And I was charging per lead. Now, this is, I don't know if this is true, but I may have been the very first ones way back then to do this per lead model, which actually is everywhere now. I mean, Home Advisor, Angie's List, they all do this per lead thing. I was doing that in the late 90s before anyone even knew what it was. So they would pay me for every lead I sent them. And then I actually morphed that where I would take a percentage of the booking. And then, I ended up selling it in the late, I think it was 2000, right when the .com boom was happening. It was starting to crash a little bit. Sold it then. The company that bought it ended up going bankrupt. I ended up buying it back for pennies on the dollar. Then I ran it again for another 6 or 7 years, and then I actually sold it again. This is when I sold it again. I sold it because I saw Uber came into the marketplace, and I didn't want to. I definitely did not want, because at the time I had about 4 employees. Didn't want to go into that realm because I knew, the valuation of my company at the time was a life-changing amount, and I didn't want any more employees. Not really into that, the big company type of thing. I'd rather have a small company, be on my own, or just a few employees. So I ended up selling it then. But basically, the mathematics in that was, I could service 10,000 people a day, and I did. I was profiting 6 figures a month easily. That's after all the bottom line costs, and I could say when you make 6 figures a month, you become a millionaire very quickly. So after I sold it, I said, hey, I could do whatever I want now. And then I started writing because writing was my passion. Incidentally, speaking of passion,
and you're a fantastic writer. You're hilarious. You read a lot of good. I read a lot of good business books or motivation books or money books or whatever, and there's good content. But for anyone that has not read MJ's, you're actually you could be a fiction writer. You're a hilarious writer, a very good writer.
Well, thank you. The fiction is actually what I want to start looking into doing. Cool. But everyone keeps telling me, hey, keep writing these books, on, business and entrepreneurship. So, hey, the market keeps telling me to write this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'll write it. The market keeps asking. It was never in my intent to continue to write in this space because it was just something I felt that needed to be said. But when the market asks, I'm going to deliver. So, but I'm going to, my new other books that are coming out are going to have a fiction element to it.
Cool.
Because that's something I enjoy. And I was bringing up the passion because all my business failures in my early entrepreneurial career were all based on passions. And I was never able to get traction, never. And that's because my passion didn't have a market. So it was when I started looking at the market and seeing what they wanted. For instance, that customer said, hey, I need another limo in New York. That's where, a big change happened when I realized you have to serve the market and what they want, not what I want.
It's almost like getting out of your ego into the actual service that needs to be provided.
Absolutely. And then you'll find that when you're providing value into the marketplace that the market loves, it kicks on a feedback loop. And that feedback loop inspires transformative passion. That's when you can, when I get someone's, hey, you just said, before we started the interview, hey, your book changed my life. Well, that makes me, that's incredibly passionate to me. That never gets old. So there's not a lot of passion when you're losing, not a lot of passion when no one wants what you're offering, when people think you suck. You go on stage and you're singing and people are booing. You're not going to be passionate about that. I'm sorry. It's just you have to connect that feedback loop to get that fired up.
So the thing that that I really see out of the common thread of your story is, so here's what happened. You had a idea, and that was kind of websites, and then you taught yourself, leaving out a lot of the details of your story, living on a little 400 square foot mattress and just pummeling into the ground all day, working on your computer to teach yourself coding. And then you got a skill, but you realized it was too hard to work. But you developed a skill which made you then come up with the idea for the limousine and taxi stuff. And then you had the skill set to build it yourself, keep all the equity instead of source it all out. So your skill that you were per hour at allowed you to eventually come up with an idea that you could fulfill on your own that then became your scalable element.
Yes. And I think especially nowadays, it's very more popular to think that the internet is the only way where you can get this mathematical advantage. And that's simply not true. Yes, the internet does offer a mathematical advantage when you're using it to market and advertise, but you don't need to have a web company to tap into these type of mathematics. Like, for instance, I own a publishing company now. My semi-retirement involves a publishing company. So the same mathematics in that company that I'm operating right now applied to my old company. I can sell millions and millions of books. My first book, The Millionaire Fastlane, is now translated in over 15 languages. So each one of those languages is a little system in itself that pays me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Obviously, I don't get paid that, it sells 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Then I get quarterly royalties. So that's the type of mathematics that's involved there. So anything product-based that exists, here, this cup, this exists separate from me. I can die tomorrow and this is still going to exist. That's a product-based business that can allow you to tap into these mathematics because you can probably produce millions of these. Obviously, a cup is pretty simple, but you want to have your creative innovation, your creative concept being able to physically exist on its own while being able to be replicated relatively easy. What I like to say is you want it easy to replicate, but difficult to create. That way, you're not getting a Chinese knockoff a week later after you create something, or so hard to create, which is an entry barrier, and then easy to replicate. That's how you tap into these mathematics. So I think a lot of people get misled that, I don't know how to code, so I don't want to, I can't start a software business. That's a fair, statement. But it does, there's products, food products. There's just so many things that can tap into these types of mathematics.
And I think that those examples for, we're not conditioned to think this way. So those examples help us kind of, it helps open the mind. Like, you even think of, there's a certain type of chiropractic I learned about recently. It's called Gonstead or Gonstead. And it was a chiropractor, right? That's not a scalable business. I mean, I guess it could be if you eventually employed other chiropractors and you were hands off, but he invented a system, and now that the guy's long dead, but that system is now, it's a patent system that people pay to get certified in, and then they practice under it. So you can see that even really traditional things that are essentially per hour things, chiropractic, massage, there are ways to still scale them. We just have to be able to take an objective step back. And I think, go ahead, please.
What you're describing is what I call legacy value creation. That's actually in my new book, Unscripted. That's when you create something that's simply going to survive a very long time, perhaps after you're gone. I think my first book, which is it's almost 10 years old now. And it still sells just as good as it sold 8 years ago. So that's telling me, hey, this might be a legacy value creation that I was able to. It's because it's pretty evergreen because it's mathematically based, and mathematics don't really change. So it's not like, hey, this is how you make millions on the internet, because what makes millions on the internet right now is not going to make millions on the internet 6 months from now. So that's legacy value creation, this Gonstead practice you mentioned, or maybe you invent a game, or you have a product or a barbecue sauce or something that's sitting on a shelf. There's so many things you can do to to say, I'm going to create something that's going to last longer than me, even if you end up selling it.
So when I first read your book, I'm 28 now, so I was 23, I think, and I had never heard anyone talk like that before. I dropped out of business school and I didn't know anything about business at all, and I'm not even sure how I read the book. And I think it was just because I was so worn out from high school speaking. I went on like a high school tour and I was sleeping wherever I was sleeping. And, sometimes I'd get $100, sometimes I'd get $500. And I was doing well. I think my best year, I made like 88 grand. I guess well is a subjective term. And I learned all these things from the book, and I actually full shift. I, at 28, became a millionaire only from my income, and alone, only from my income, because it took such a huge growth, and I stopped everything that wasn't actually scalable. And I totally had a total paradigm shift. And you start the book Fastlane Millionaire with what you describe as the MTV Cribs episode that never happened. And the reason I bring that up is because I ended up becoming having a relative amount of financial success so far at my age from everything that it wasn't that I was taught not to do it, because I'd never heard it anyways. It was just the exact opposite of what I was taught, which was, as you said, and you call in the book, wealth in a wheelchair, which was, I was caught in this place when I found your book. I was reading really traditional Dave Ramsey people, and then I found yours. I might even have found it on the Amazon suggestion. And I was like, okay, so I guess I should get my 401k and my Roth IRA, and I don't make very much money. 88,000 a year after taxes is what, like 60. So I'll put, $2,000 in a year, and I'm running my Dave Ramsey calculators, and I'll have $88 million by the time I'm 74. And so I was so unsure of myself. And then what you wrote in the book made so much sense, and it caught my attention immediately. And I was hoping you could describe the MTV Cribs that never happened and wealth in a wheelchair.
Sure. That's if you're, I'm sure your audience is familiar with it, and they would take a famous person from, a celebrity or something, and they would walk around this just palatial estate, and there's cars and there's gadgets and there's just immaculate. And they always, if the person is not relatively known, because there used to be Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, which was back in my era. And Robin Leach would go around this palatial estate, and then they'd finally say, "Hey, how did you do this? What do you do for a living?" And each and every time, it was an athlete, a celebrity, an entrepreneur, a Wall Street executive, not a person investing in Wall Street, but an executive, a Goldman Sachs guy or something like that. Never once was it somebody that said, "Hey, man, this beautiful place is just because I saved all my money and put it into my 401k. And, I religiously, I stopped drinking coffee for 20 years. And now look at this. Isn't it wonderful?" And that's the truth of it. You never find anybody that's living a rock star life that is relatively young still, who got that way because they followed the conventional advice of the conventional gurus, which is stop buying stuff, settle for less, put all that money, give it to Wall Street so that Wall Street executive can live in Greenwich, Connecticut and his 10-bedroom estate, and then wait until you're 65 years old, because then that's when you're going to get rich. That's when you can finally retire and have chrome rims on your wheelchair when you're too old to enjoy any of this stuff. So, and the thing is, that method is a figment of the rat race, and that's why it's so popular. It's a part of the rat race. There's two parts of the rat race. One is the consumption race, which is if you buy everything you want, you'll be happy, which is one part of it. The other part is the investment slave rat race, which is stop buying everything and save it, give it to Wall Street, and then wait 50 years. Neither one of those. Only rats win rat races. So my philosophy is to get away from both of those types of things. And the truth of the matter, the only people getting rich on that stuff is the people selling it.
Yeah, no, it's the truth. So, first of all, you forgot the most important part, which was the name of the character at the beginning of the book. Big Daddy Who.
Big Daddy Who.
Yeah, and Big Daddy Who had all of his gold chains, and Big Daddy, and they were like, "Yo, Big Daddy Who, where'd you get this sick crib from?" And you said, "Well, I got it from investing in mutual funds in my 401k, and I got it by the time I was 30 years old."
Yeah,
and it's
I wrote the book 10 years ago, so it's my memory. My memory is, what I wrote.
But it really opens your mind, because, okay, let's say, for instance, that, for some people working all that time at the job, and then when they're, 67 or whatever, they have a couple million, right? It's not like that won't work. But the question, and I think the most important thing is then we resign to the fact that there's opportunities to actually do it in half the time. It doesn't mean somebody still couldn't max out their 401k or their whatever their stuff is, but the real thing is it almost puts you in a mindset where you give up the possibility of anything else happening, and it just puts you in like a robotic loop where it's just like, well, one day I'll get there.
The rat race wheel. It's what it is, and it's so insidiously deceptive because the slow lane, or that's not the slow lane, the sidewalk is based on a consumption mentality. Spend everything you earn, live large. You only live once. Get up to your eyeballs in debt, and that will be happy. You'll be happy when you buy the BMW. You'll be happy when you buy the house. You'll be happy this. You'll be happy that. And then it insidiously, once you figure out this is not going to work. This is misery. Then you graduate to the slow lane, which is another part of the rat race, which is, well, instead of spending all my money and having all this debt, I'm going to pay all that debt off. I'm going to save everything I earn, not buy anything, not go out to eat anymore, flush the toilet once a day. I'm just going to save everything. And then I'm going to give it to Wall Street and let it grow for 50 years. That's the two sides of the same coin. And it's all an economic slavery system. And it's funny because people figure it out. Oh, yeah, this is not working. This debt thing ain't working. And then they graduate to that. It's the same thing. It's just the two sides of the same coin.
I have a new book title for you for your next book.
Okay.
Toilet Millionaire. And it could be about how flushing the toilet once a day will make you rich and happy. So let's define, for anyone that's not aware of your work, sidewalk, slow lane, and fast lane. Sidewalk would be, for instance, tell me if I'm right or wrong, sidewalk would be the average person that maybe they have the average American salary, which the government now says is up to $60,000. And they spend all that. The average 76% of people live paycheck to paycheck. The average person has $10,000 in credit card debt. So it'd be about that type of person.
Correct. It's the mindset is consumption. Spend what you earn. There's no financial plan. It's just you're living for today. You're not thinking about tomorrow. You're just. And the thing is about sidewalkers is they look very affluent. They drive BMWs and Mercedes. But they lose their job. They're 2 months from broke because they have no savings. They're not thinking about tomorrow. They're only thinking about today. So that's the sidewalk. Actually, a lot of athletes are sidewalkers. As soon as they retire from their professional career, you hear stories about them being bankrupt a year later. And that's because they have spent everything they've earned. And then when the income stops, the spending doesn't stop. And then it eventually catches up to them. And the slow lane is the graduation from the sidewalk when the sidewalker realizes I can't live this way. This is not working. This isn't making me happy. And then the media, the financial media, the financial gurus, they pump up this other index fund narrative. Stop spending and start saving. Give it all to Wall Street, and then be patient for 50 years because the stock market will work its miracles, and you'll be a millionaire. And it's really popular nowadays because we've been in a bull market, 10-year bull market right now. So this stuff is literally everywhere. And to be honest, I'm waiting for a crash because we're going to see a lot of chickens come to roost. When people realize putting your life savings into the stock market as a long-term plan is a bad plan.
The guy that the Big Short was based off, forgetting his name now,
Michael Lewis.
something. Yeah, he said just recently, I don't know if you saw that he said that they asked him what he thought the biggest bubble now was, and he said index funds. He said these passive investments he thought were the biggest bubble that existed.
Yeah, when everyone is doing the same thing, that's when you know there's going to be trouble in the future. I don't know when, or it could be in 6 months, it could be in 6 years. There's going to be trouble when everyone is doing the same thing. It's what I call the law of everyone. And the slow lane, the problem with the slow lane is because, let me be clear, there's nothing wrong with saving money, of course.
Right.
This game is not won on defense. Defense is the slow lane. Defense is saving everything you earn and waiting for 50 years. The game is won on offense. If you make $50,000 a month, $100,000 a month, it is very, very easy to save 80% of it.
Mm-hmm. Because
you're spending $20,000 a month on a good lifestyle. So there's nothing wrong with saving. It's not. I don't want people to say, "Well, he thinks you should spend everything, or you should."
Right.
No, the game is won on offense. You want a strong offense, which is income explosion and asset explosion, not defense. Defense is squeezing nickels from dimes, and that's not going to work. That's a time-based approach, and you don't have a lot of time.
I was reading. I just finished 2 days ago before our interview. I wanted a nice polarity. Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. Read the whole book. There is actually in the entire book not a single mention to growing your income other than paying, when he gets to the baby step about paying off your debt, and he says sell stuff to pay it off. Yeah. He doesn't even talk about maybe start a business, which is obviously what he's done. He doesn't make any mention to, and I think all of his steps I don't think any of them are wrong or dumb. It's just the probably the most important one is not there, which is, yes, can you double or triple or 10x your income?
Correct. It puts you into the rat race ecosystem. That's all it does. And I'm sure in that system, the advice is good. If that's your goal, hey, I'm going to gamble and I'm going to be patient for 50 years and hope I can retire a multimillionaire because of the stock market. Hey, if you want to make that gamble, go right ahead. But here's the thing. All the people that teach this stuff are not rich because of it. Is Dave Ramsey rich because he's followed this advice? No, he's sold millions and millions of books. He's syndicated nationally around the country. Therefore, he has access to millions of mathematics, what we've been discussing here. He makes a large income. And I guarantee you, he's probably saving a lot of it as well.
And super scalable income, right?
Super scalable. Again, we're talking about mathematics here. So he is fundamentally getting rich with one mathematical equation while he's teaching other people this other mathematical equation. I mean, all these financial gurus do the same thing. I'm not going to name names, but there's a billionaire out there who's preaching the index fund narrative. He's a billionaire who runs a hedge fund. And the people are gobbling this shit up. Don't you see the duplicity? Okay, he's not rich because he's following index fund advice. He's rich because he runs a freaking hedge fund and is managing millions of the rat race money.
And you look at Ramsey, for instance, and I was like, I agree with everything he's saying. And I think it's valuable advice. I just think he's missing such an important element. And earlier we were discussing, I said, well, you could be like a chiropractic, and technically you could have other people work for you. He employs that model with he has financial coaches that work on his behalf. So he has the entire scalable model that's leveraging other people's efforts or systems. And for anyone that is a Dave Ramsey fan, I think what he's saying, great. You just got to look at how can you increase your income. And I think you were the first person I ever heard that. I was like, wow, finally, this actually kind of makes sense to me.
Yes, it's one on offense. You got to go on offense. You got to get the big income. You can't get the big income though unless you tap into these mathematical types of situations where you can scale. And that's basically it in a nutshell. And it's frustrating when these people that teach us one thing, but they're essentially getting rich with another thing. And another good example is some years ago, there was a website that actually preached all this stuff. Save your dollars, save your nickels, clip coupons, give it all to index funds and just be patient. The stock market, don't sell at the low, Well, that guy who's preaching this slow lane stuff actually ended up selling his business for millions and millions of dollars. So he got rich using a fast lane equation, a fast lane mathematics, teaching slow lane equations, slow lane mathematics. It's just so, I don't understand why people can't see through this. It's frustrating to me.
My answer to that, why people can't see through it, is fundamentally because we aren't really taught anything about business. Like, people would know that if, for instance, the type of curriculum that you teach in Fastlane Millionaire was something that was commonplace. It's just that we don't understand. I can speak for myself, being, not being far removed from my teens and talking to so many young people, is it's fundamentally, there's not a pattern recognition to notice because we don't know what to look for anyways. Yeah. And that's why your work is so important.
Well, here's some pattern recognition for you. And this is something I noticed many years ago. Everyone that is rich, young, living a great lifestyle has done so through a mathematical equation that has allowed them to get rich. So if you're a celebrity, you leverage a mathematical equation because you're famous. LeBron James is the only person with LeBron James skills. So he's going to be paid a leveraged amount. Celebrities, actors, you're in front of a screen and you're entertaining millions of people. Entrepreneurs, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, Ellis, all these people have touched the lives of millions of people and hence are paid millions of dollars. So again, how many people can you touch? How many people can you impact with your creative value will tell me how much money you can eventually possibly make. So when you're a teacher making $60,000 a year, I can unequivocally guess that next year you will also make $60,000 a year, plus or minus 5%. I can tell you won't make $600,000 a year. You won't make $6 million a year. You won't make $60 million, simply because you have accessed and leveraged a mathematical equation that is limiting what you are doing.
And I think then the question is, let's say you were a teacher making $60K a year. Nothing wrong with that. If you want a financial freedom, then the question is, okay, what type of scalable business might be able to be approached during those summer months? You have a very long summer that might be able to, in 3 to 5 to 7 years, be something that you could still keep your teacher job because maybe you're super passionate about kids, but during those summer months, you can get it off the ground, maybe bring on another partner that can hard-nosed drive it during those school year months that could double or triple your income, or eventually be a totally scalable system you could sell, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part.
Yeah. And I also want to clarify that this is not about Lamborghinis, fast cars, big houses. This is about freedom. This is about setting yourself free and having the ability to do what you want. You know, the ultimate bullshit cliche that I've ever heard is money doesn't buy happiness. And that's absolute bullshit, because the money isn't buying the right thing. For most people, when they have an income increase, they're not using the money to buy freedom. They're using it to buy more bondage. You know, a bigger house, a bigger car, faster car, bigger, trendier clothes. You know, yeah, of course, money's not going to buy happiness then. But when you use it to buy your freedom and buy things that are important to you, it does buy happiness. And I'm going to give you an example here. Last year, I have a pet, a dog. His name is Hachi. Just the most incredible creature you would have ever meet. He was a pound dog. Well, suddenly he stopped walking. It was one leg, and then it became two legs, and suddenly he could no longer walk. Now, this was a relatively young dog, 7 years old, and all of a sudden he wouldn't walk. He couldn't walk anymore. And he went from, you know, running like crazy in the yard to just being the most vivacious pet you can ever have. And then he stopped walking. And we got to the point where we almost had to carry him outside to do his business. So we took him to the doctor, and turns out he shredded both his anterior cruciate ACLs in his knees and his back legs, to the point where he couldn't walk anymore. And the good news was, well, this is fixable. He can walk again, but it's going to require surgery on both legs. And the cost of each leg was $6,000. So I didn't bat an eye. Wrote the check. Let's get it done. Now, if I didn't have that money, we would have to put him down. Okay. So, and I remember thinking about that. Money don't buy happiness. Okay. Well, money just saved our beloved pet that we would otherwise have to put down to have a very expensive surgery. And today he's running like crazy. He's back to normal. And that made possible because I had the wherewithal, the financial freedom to make that decision in my life. And this pet, this dog, Hachi, brings incredible happiness and joy to my life. And I can't imagine having life without him. So when someone says money's not buying happiness, it's because they're spending it on the wrong thing. And they're just probably just pissed off that, well, I'm not going to make a lot of money, so I'm going to, you know, fall on this stupid platitude and be happy with it. It's another rat race cliche to keep you amenable to the system.
I realized when that was actually one of the most common things I said, that it didn't buy happiness. This was when I didn't have any money. And I realized that it was also a unconscious justification that I made for my present circumstances of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is not about, they've actually done studies on this, the happiness studies. And they researched thousands of people and determining what makes you happy. And 50% of your happiness quotient comes from what's called autonomy. Autonomy is freedom. The ability to wake up in the morning when you want to wake up, do what you want, do what you find valuable, do meaningful work. That is 50% of your happiness equation. Now, money can buy that. Like, for instance, I write. And I write things that may not have mainstream market appeal. I write things that may not follow a publisher model. I can do it. I can do it because I have freedom. I have autonomy. I have the ability to do these things. And that is incredibly joyful. So if you think money doesn't buy that, you're deluding yourself.
Yeah, amen. So we got interest rates getting lower and lower, national debt getting greater and greater, Trump getting madder and madder at the Fed for not cutting rates, which to me is a clear indication he knows a recession is on the corner. He needs to keep the economy propped up before the next elections coming up pretty soon. We have all of these issues going on and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that this isn't sustainable. When you have people like Paul Tudor Jones and all these mainstream hedge people, and they're really saying, you know, something's come in, and they're talking about gold and silver and all these things. what do you make of all this? Do you have any plan of protection against a impending recession, or just in general? I think at some point, it seems likely at some point that we're not going, and it may be when I'm 50, 60, but at some point we're not going to be able to run this economy based off of debt, not just national debt. This whole economy is running off of consumer confidence, which is just a bunch of people spending money that they don't have. I don't know how this can last forever. What do you think about all that?
I think there's going to be a major event happening, and to be honest, it's quite a debate on my forum and on how to prepare for such an event. Some people say gold, silver. Some people say cash underneath a mattress. For me, it's always been to be free and clear. I own my house, free and clear. I have no debt. I have ample cash reserves. Part of me has some, gold and silver and whatnot. It's uncharted waters. It's, the old phrase, the black swan. You don't know what that's going to look like until it happens. So I would love to sit here and say I know what to do and how to prepare for it. The fact is nobody does. And I don't either. I just know that I'm going to be prepared the best I can with what I know. If it's a major apocalyptic event, money might not be worth anything. So it might be a number on a screen that has absolutely zero value. There might be hyperinflation. There might be, guns and ammo might be the new currency. I wish I could tell you. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
No, about the same. I mean, I don't know. I think you're right that one of the things that you can count on is you should not have debt. I mean, maybe if somebody had a reasonable home mortgage, but any of that other stuff's got to get rid of as soon as possible just to get wealthy, even take out the economy.
Well, and a mix of hard assets as well. Part of the mentality of having a house that you own free and clear is because it's a hard asset. I mean, no matter what happens to the money system, if you have a building that you can call your own, there's hard material resource assets involved with that, labor, the roof, the wood, the plumbing, all that. So, that's going to have an effect. That's why gold is such a popular go-to, but gold has no utility value, unless people are willing to buy into the belief that it's a tradable commodity. Gold is no different than money because it has no utility other than, it's history, it's allure, as opposed to silver, which is silver has industrial value to it, right, and manufacturing value. So again, I think a mix of all that. I wouldn't want to have a lot of money in the bank as well, which is another reason why to have some hard assets, some real estate, which again, nothing is going to survive. Real estate will go down, asset values will go down, stock prices will go down. So there'll be nobody that's really immune from it. But if you're debt free and you have your house free and clear, the only metric that you're going to be subjected to there is property taxes, and property taxes will not be going up in a recession; they'll be going down.
That makes sense. So, can I ask you? So, like I said, I shifted my whole worldview, entrepreneurial view, business, all that stuff, and that just from my income alone, I had $1 million cash, and I started to do this and that with it now, so as I don't just have it sitting in one account somewhere. But I wanted to ask you, you sold this company, got a bunch of cash. What do you do with it? What is your, if you talk about how the slow lane model doesn't work, what did you do? Maybe you're probably not as active as you used to do, but what did you do with all the cash when you started getting the checks from the sale and stuff?
Again, I believe in a mix of different things. I don't believe you should put all your money into the stock market. So I have a mix of cash. Again, I own my house free and clear. I own actually some other real estate. But you can make it a monthly income from market capital investments. The narrative is you want 8 to 10% a year, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. And people will argue, well, look at the stock market it's made more than that in the last 10 years. Yes, you're absolutely correct. I look for beating inflation and getting a 1-2% return, which for me means bonds. After inflation, which means for me is municipal bonds.
Okay.
Which if you're this is America specific, which is tax free. And I have a business which is in a high income as well. So there's diversification there in having an income through a business. There's diversification in having a tax-free income with municipal bonds, which I'm in a specific state fund, which pays about 3.5%, which is tax-free, which makes the effective yield about 6 or 7%. So that has less volatility. Obviously, that's not going to be immune from a depression as well. But again, I'm not looking to leverage all this money into a 10% yield. I use that for my businesses, for my business ventures, for my business speculations, for my real estate. I do not look to the markets to make 10%, 12%. I look to the markets to give me a monthly paycheck. That's it. And a lot of times that's just a low yield. The money markets started to pay well. Now they're lowering interest rates again. So, and that's the whole objective there is to get people to put them into more riskier assets. It's kind of like a prod to the middle class. Hey, you're not making any money, saving money and putting it in the bank. Give it to the stock market.
Huh.
So it's kind of like another systemic prod to pour money into the markets.
That's interesting. So for someone that's not aware, what you're saying is as interest rates lower, your cash on hand becomes worth less. So then they're saying, hey, invest into the market here.
Yeah, that's the whole point of lowering interest rates is they want you to go into more riskier assets, which usually means the stock market. And that's what I believe the recent market run up in the later Obama years and in the early Trump administration is based upon a low interest rate environment, because that's where the money is going to go. It's going to go into the market. And that's another reason why Trump is probably complaining about interest rates going up. He wants them lower, so that will force the market up. And if the market is really high, his chances of re-election go up dramatically.
Do you follow that much about the problems, or do you find yourself more detached from it because you own your house free and clear and you have the
detached from what?
Emotionally detached from the ins and outs of what's happening in the U.S. and global economy. Like I look at it and I'm like, man, I'm just like sometimes it makes me afraid and angry because I mean. A lot of people just think it'll go on forever. I don't know how it will, but it makes me nervous and gives me anxiety a little bit.
I stopped following. I try to pay attention to financial matters. I stopped paying attention to politics a while ago. The system is so corrupt. It's just, and I'm not saying that it's Democrats or Republicans.
My question was about financial though. Like when you look at the economy,
Yes, I try to pay attention. Like, for instance, the Federal Reserve has been pumping liquidity into the overnight rate,
right?
The overnight bank. I forgot what it's called.
The repo market.
The repo market. Yeah, they've been pumping, and it keeps going up. And the markets haven't really reacted to that much, and I find that unusual.
I thought so too.
So. The liquidity problem is what would cause a significant market crash. And
could you explain what that means? Liquidity.
Well, if people are selling and there's no buyers, that forces rates to go down, not rates, prices. So if you say, hey, I got my Amazon stock I think it's about $17.50 right now. hey, I want to sell this Amazon stock for 1,700, and there's no buyer at 1,700. And you say, well, I'm going to go 1,600. Well, there's no buyer at 1,600. Okay, 1,500. And so it keeps going lower and lower because there's no buyers. That's liquidity. So
Okay.
you need liquidity buyers to keep prices stable. So when there's no liquidity, the prices plummet. But monetary policy, um, monetary economics is not my strong suit. So I wish I could tell you what all this means when the Fed is pumping money into the repo market. It just doesn't smell right to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I was just wondering your personal opinion on all of it. I wasn't looking for you to give me a whole dissertation, so it's all good. I was
okay.
just curious your thoughts.
Yeah,
And
I don't think a trade deal is going to happen. That's a market instrument or a market event that could have I think China is going to wait till the election to, really. They're more patient. China's long game. Americans are short game, and I think they're going to wait to see what happens.
to me, I think for anyone listening, I think that's why taking the time to study your work and study your books right now is also really important, because let's say even you had a great plan with your 401k and your Roth IRA, and it was looking good and you had enough income to get some leverage with that. I just don't trust. I have some money in that. It's not my plan, and I don't trust it because I got to wait till I'm 65 and there's all these things happening. I don't even know what the economy will be like in 45 years. And I think that's why your work is really important. And it's important right now. There is a sense of urgency to study it and to start to apply a scalable model.
Yeah, I think you want the capital markets as a part of your plan. You just don't want it to be the plan.
So in conclusion, let me ask you, out of all the people that are commenting on your forum, people writing you, what do you think is the number one biggest problem that you see either in the general public or most specifically readers that you notice? The number one problem that people are having that's not allowing them to achieve this, whatever their desired level of freedom and such is?
I think they're complicating it. And when we talk about people on my forum are entrepreneurs and they're aspiring entrepreneurs. And I think they're complicating entrepreneurship. It's really quite simple. You create value. And they're like, well, how do I create value? Well, you create a value skew. A value skew is something that compels somebody to buy from you. The example I give is when you're in the grocery store and you're looking at buying a bag of tortilla chips. You have two bags that are in front of you. One has a nice label. The other one's kind of one has GMO ingredients. The other doesn't. All those items that compel you to open up your wallet and give money is a value skew. For instance, this was an actual buying process I went under. I was looking to buy a bag of tortilla chips, and I ended up buying the more expensive brand simply because they had non-GMO ingredients. That's a value skew. So a value skew is anything that is better than your competition. And all you have to do is skew one variable. You skew one variable, meaning your product is slightly better. Maybe your customer service is better. Maybe you have a better ingredient. Maybe you're lacking an ingredient. For instance, I don't like artificial colors, red 40, blue 60, all that crap. I don't like artificial sweeteners. Maybe it's you don't have those particular ingredients. Maybe I went vegan 2 years ago. I cannot believe the amount of opportunity in this space because I'm in the space. I see what the needs are. And it's simply offering a skew of doing something slightly better than the competitor is doing, because that was what compels people to buy from you. I've had people say, hey, years ago, I joined your service because you answered your email within 6 minutes. That was a simple concept. And that was a skew that caused somebody to give me money. So people will give you money when they perceive a skew that balances it to your side. It takes you over a threshold and say, hey, I'm going to choose that person. And that's ultimately what it is the more variables you skew, the more odds you have of actually money moving to you through the sale.
I like that. So one of the things that really blew my mind kind of in conclusion when I read your book, I never really thought about it, because you think of the millionaire mark being a lot of money, and then you take into consideration inflation and and the lower the interest rates, then all the assets are getting so much higher in cost, so then your money doesn't go as far. And in Fastlane Millionaire, you say it's really not very much money, and you kind of got to wrap your head around that if you really want to have scalable. And you said, the number you should really be looking at more is 10 million and up. And why did you say that?
Based on my own experience, when I had $1 million, when I first made my first million, and when I mean first million, I talk about liquid. You have money, you have $1 million laying around, and I realized this is nothing. My life really doesn't change. I can't live this extravagant lifestyle that I envision. And then I said, well, okay, maybe it's 5 million. So we got up to 5 million. It was a little bit different, but it was still a little bit the same. It wasn't like, I lived in a bigger house, had faster cars, whatnot, but I still was a little bit. So, I realized that it was about 10 million and above where you really start to feel, hey, I can do what I want, when I want, buy what I want, walk in the store, just snap my fingers. To have that level of freedom, you really need to be in the, was that 8 figures, 6, 7, 8? Yeah, the 8-figure realm, to really have that kind of freedom. And for a lot of your listeners, they may only need 1 or 2 million. It depends on, how you envision yourself, living. Many people can live freely in a very small house and be very happy with it. That's fine.
And where you live too,
and where you live, exactly. So it's a personal preference. 1 million may be plenty for some people. Maybe it'd be 5 for others, 10 for others. It depends on your personal preference on how you envision your unscripted life.